So I just found this cassette tape of my grandmother, Diane Entilich, in 1992 when I was at my dad's house going through things. And Rob got me this Sony cassette tape. So I'm listening to this for the first time in 30 years. And I just came across this part about Nyack.
We moved to Nyack, New York.
When?
When I was in the 4th grade.
Yeah.
There, my parents went into the ladies' ready-to-wear business in Nyack, New York, which was the widest part of the Hudson River, 3.5 miles across the river from Tarrytown, New York. And at that time, the only way to get there was on a ferry boat. Went across, which was it's amazing. I don't think this generation of people could imagine how you fit only a certain amount of cars on that and on that ferry.
Sort of like one in Staten Island.
Is it still that way? But that's bigger. This was smaller. Yeah. I remember John D. Rockefeller lived in Tarrytown, New York. And he would come over on the ferry and toss dimes to the children who lived there. And the poor children lived down by the ferry. You know, Nyack was built on a hill, on the Palisades. And every street was a hill going uphill. And I never remember seeing it. I remember my parents talking about it. That how he came and tossed shiny dimes to the children. I thought it was pretty generous. Usually a penny was worth a lot in those days. Well, anyway, I got my schooling there. I went to high school at Nyack, New York. And that's where I met Saul, because he was the same age as I, although he was always a year ahead of me, because he was very, very bright, and in those days they didn't know what to do with him, so they skipped him a year. So when he was in the 1st grade, I don't remember exactly what year it was, but he went from the 1st to the 3rd. Uh-oh, you answer, I don't know.
I'll just pause this.
Yeah. I'll do the one I said. But anyway, he was always a year ahead of me.
So you met him your freshman year of high school, did you say?
Oh, no. I knew him all of my life from the 4th grade up because we went to the same temple together.
Were your parents
Is this
friends?
on?
Yes. Were your parents friends?
Oh, yes. It was a small town, and all of the Jewish people knew each other very well, besides the people they knew in their business world.
Was his family Orthodox?
No, they were not. They were very traditional, and his father was president of the temple for a long time and was responsible for building their building. They used to meet in houses then.
So you kept kosher and...
Oh, yes, to the very last degree, and I could still keep a kosher house if I had to.
What other things did you have to do as an Orthodox Jew? In this day and time, we think of Orthodoxy as quite completely different than we are. But in those days, they weren't so different because the Reform movement was never even discovered. I mean, the Reformed Temple was not even discovered. Oh, I see. So you either had Orthodoxy or conservative?
Oh, in different degrees, yes, of it. But the Petersell family were very traditional and very, very concerned with the temple and what went on in the congregation.
So you went to the same temple, but he wasn't an Orthodox Jew?
No, he was a very comical man, a very bright man, but a very funny man. One Yom Kippur, he passed out toothpicks to everybody coming out of the temple, which was a big joke because...
Who did Saul?
No, his father.
That's
His
not
father,
funny.
yes.
Okay. He passed out toothpicks. Why?
Because he was scoffing at the fact that they probably needed it, even though they stayed in the temple. And then, on Yom Kippur, you stay until dark. And so he, I guess, just had to have some form of release.
Yeah. He spent a good deal of time in the temple.
Yes. And and then we had the rabbis. We had a new rabbi every year because it was so close to New York, the theological seminary, and that this was their practice grounds. All the little towns close to New York were that way. And they'd stay a year and then find places that they would like to live in, or go. So, but every rabbi would have a different personality and a different way of teaching. And I can safely say that everything I learned in Hebrew, and I even could speak a little Hebrew from the 4th grade, which I learned in the Talmud Torah. Then, with the constant change of rabbis, I never learned as much as I did through the 4th grade when I came to Nyack. But it was interesting. We had to go in the middle of the week. We had to go maybe 1 day a week or 2 days a week at the most. And that was it. We didn't have to go anymore. Except when the parents took us on the high holy days, and my parents went on Friday nights too.
Mm-hmm. So you remember Saul's father and mother?
Oh, very well. He liked me very much. His father and the mother. They were encouraging this marriage. They liked it. Even though we started going together in the 6th, 7th grade. On and off, this puppy love thing. And as a matter of fact, Marcus Petersell, the one Mark is named for,
Who's he?
he was Saul's father.
Okay. What are the, check their names off.
All right. It was Marcus and Elizabeth Petersell.
Okay.
They call her Lizzie.
Now, isn't it true in the Jewish religion that you name your children after
The dead.
The dead?
And that's what I'm coming to. That when...
Do you know what their parents' names were?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay.
All I know was that Elizabeth's maiden name was named Kaplan, because I knew her sister and her brother. After Saul and I were married, that's where we stayed for a while, at Elizabeth Petersell's sister's home in Philadelphia.
Okay, so go on.
Well, anyway, right soon after we were married...
No, wait, they had Saul, and did Saul have any brothers and sisters?
Oh, my dear, yes.
Yes, he did.
He had Ted, who was the oldest, Milton, and Norman. There were 4 boys.
Wait, where did Saul, was he the...
And second from the oldest.
Okay.
He was the first one to die.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And Norman. Norman was little.
Yes, he was 11. I taught him in school. Yeah, I taught him I don't know what grade now.
So you two met,
And then we went together on and off for years. I went off to school, and then I came back.
where did you go? Off
I went to New Paltz.
college?
Yes, it was a teacher's normal school, a 3-year course training elementary school children. Oh, training elementary school children, and you could take a junior high course too.
Mm-hmm. Now, did he go to school, Saul?
Oh, no, he did not. His father, who had heart trouble and never told his family. Now, this was an interesting thing. He didn't want to worry his wife, who he loved dearly. That was a very good marriage. And he knew he had heart disease, so he set up a business. It was called a stationery store of newspapers, cigarettes, and all sorts of things you'd find in a stationery store.
Mm-hmm.
And very soon after we were married, in our very first apartment, the first year, it was in 1936 that he died, the same year that we were married. That was a very traumatic experience in our young lives.
He died of heart?
Yeah, a heart attack. And that's when we learned that he had had heart disease, but never told his family.
So how, okay, go ahead.
And it was the first funeral I had ever been to. And
I bet it was crowded.
yes, it was, because he was a very important man in the community.
Was it at the same temple we went to?
I don't even know. I think it was at a funeral home. I don't think it was in a temple. I don't think Orthodoxy upheld that theory. I mean, they didn't allow.
So, how old were you when you got married and saw?
22.
And so that's when his father died.
In 1936. Yeah, the same year. Well, from there on, we stayed. Where am I now? I forgot.
You just got married.
Oh, I went through my childhood
Right.
in Nyack and got married and went to Philadelphia.
Well, wait, we haven't gotten there. You went to school, right?
Yeah.
A teacher's school?
Yes, and
Tell me
then.
about the Vassar girls.
Oh, that was funny. New Paltz was a very few miles from Highland, New York. And I belonged to a girls' sorority. It was a Jewish sorority, the only one on the campus. And they only had 500 students. And most of them were girls, very few boys.
At New Paltz?
Yes, very few boys. And everybody who lived close by went home. But the students who lived in Poughkeepsie always went home.
Right.
And the way we went home is as follows. It is shocking in today's world. We went as a group, like 4 or 5 of us, and hitchhiked from New Paltz to Highland, where the ferry went across the Hudson River to Poughkeepsie.
Mhm.
We got to we went on the ferry and we walked. This girl lived, or maybe somebody picked us up, I don't remember that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent the weekend at Poughkeepsie, and then we immediately, this was when the Depression was still very, very much felt when we were adolescents going to school. So no one had it very much.
You didn't tell me about how that affected your family.
Oh, it was bad for my family.
When did it begin, Depression?
The Depression happened right after the crash on Wall Street in 1929. But in 1936, 7 years later, it was still very bad on these people.
Now, did